I was about to throw away this old, expired epoxy resin left over from when a time everyone, including myself, was making river tables. The internet said that it was too old and wouldn't cure, but I risked some premium Burl wood and turned it into this. This piece of maple burl has been sitting on a shelf for a few years now, and I thought that this was the perfect project for it. The first step was to clean off the bark so that the epoxy had something solid to bond to, but I had a hard time removing the bark that was trapped on the inside of the wood. You would see this show up later on in the project. For the mold, I tried a 3D printed one. This saves a ton of resin and the blank comes out perfectly round, ready for the lathe. Come on, I think it'll work. Sold my bandsaw. This is all I have. That barely makes it. That kind of sucked. That was like the uppermost limit of this jigsaw, but got it done. It's really just dab here, dab there, and just slide it in. Now this part was a gamble because instead of using new resin, I used some leftover from a project I had done 7 years ago, and the hardener had turned completely yellow. The resin was totally crystallized, and everything I read online said it was a bad idea because it wouldn't cure properly. I didn't want to throw it away, so I gave it a shot by melting the resin back into liquid. Are we mixing this? Okay.
Say hi to YouTube, Jordan.
Hi, YouTube.
It's Jordan.
I'm rebooting the old high school channel. This is Madeline, by the way. My wife. Helping me. What should I do?
Against her will.
And so before this was all crystallized, like honey. Fortunately, wow, that is really... That looks like urine. No, so it's like 7 years old. That looks like it's gonna be very slow. Maybe if I mix it, it'll fix itself. One in here. Yellow would make the most sense.
Okay.
Does that scream yellow to you? Does it scream this to you? Kind of.
It kind of does.
Or this.
Even maybe silver.
I'm just gonna add like that much.
What did I do?
So I'm just gonna like see what happens. Very glittery. Dramatic effect. Are we just kidding? I don't know. Pop the bubbles. This could go really bad. To get rid of air bubbles, I used a DIY pressure pot, but I made a mistake that almost ruined the entire thing. I didn't leak test it at first, and it started losing air that night, and I couldn't do anything to really stop it, so trying to save it, I ended up running out to the garage every few hours to top it up with air. I was scared that this drop in air pressure had re-expanded the bubbles and ruined the blank, but after 36 hours I took it out and it looked great. It kind of got too low, so we lose a little bit. After waiting a full week for the epoxy to cure, I broke it out of the 3D printed mold. To mount it to the lathe, I skipped using a chuck and I just used a waste block instead. You'll see why I did this later on in the video. After all that prep work, it was finally time for the fun part. I had this lathe since I was a teenager, and it's the machine I first learned on, and honestly it's the reason why I fell in love with woodworking in the first place. I've since moved on to doing different projects and some things like CNC work, but it's still fun to come back to the same machine that I learned on to make something. Now, I've made a bowl like this before, but man, I forgot how messy the epoxy gets. The epoxy dust and ribbons just get everywhere. The resin actually cuts really smooth with the carbide tools. For about 90% of the project, I used a round carbide scraper. On my last bowl, I turned a mortise on the bottom so that the chuck could grip it. It works well, but I always thought that the leftover recess looked a bit ugly because you could see it through the resin. This time I decided to glue a waste block on instead. This lets me turn the entire piece and just cut it off right at the end. The biggest hurdle here was chip out. If you take too deep of a cut, you catch a bad angle. The epoxy loves to fracture, and that gets incredibly frustrating near the end when you're trying to get your final thickness. Once I was finished with the shape, I used a flap wheel on my drill to quickly knock down any high spots and smooth out any transitions. Then I started to work my way through the sandpaper grits, making sure to stop and sand with the grain between each step. This helps hide any circular tool or sandpaper marks you might have. To get a glass-like finish with the resin, I switched over to a sandpaper system called micromesh. I used all 9 sanding pads, and I used a plastic polish to bring out the clarity of the resin. Since both the wood and the epoxy were already polished, I didn't need a heavy finish, so I just applied some simple paste wax to give the project some protection and a nice natural feel. To get it off the lathe, I used a parting tool and a pole saw to separate the bowl from the waste block. I used an orbital sander to get the bottom about 80% flat, but to finish it off I went in by hand to carve out the base so that it could sit perfectly flat. Now, I've had a lot of fun with this project, and I'm really glad that those mistakes I made didn't affect the final outcome. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and let me know what you think. I appreciate your support. We'll see you later.